Hey, all viewers and viewesses, my name is General Red Strategist and welcome back to So Being Hunted. This is episode 300, no not 300, whoa, what just happened there? I just got spun away from that body then, that was a bit weird. I really interrupted, God I can't even speak all of a sudden, interrupted my intro just there. Episode 434, that's what I'm trying to say. Don't know why I started off with 300, that was a bit weird. But yeah, welcome back of course to So Being Hunted. Now, previous episode I kind of balls things up, didn't I? I was doing a challenge, my Elmer Fudd challenge, my rabbit hunting challenge, and I kind of accidentally nudged my friggin' timer and caused it to reset when I was trying to time myself down from 30 minutes, which kind of ballsed up the channel because I hadn't been paying attention to whereabouts the timer was at the moment when I nudged it. So unfortunately, I couldn't just reset it to a kind of lower amount of time and then just keep going and sort of estimate 30 minutes instead. But no, I just couldn't. Yep, I couldn't begin to do that, ladies and gents. So unfortunately, who knows, maybe I'll have to chalk that one up as a fail and do the rabbit hunting challenge again at some point in the not too distant future. If I, feel, a strong urge to do it again, that is. But for this one, we're just going to have a podcast-style episode. It's going to be good. NIMBY cheating, you'll never leave. I'm sure I will in a second once I've raided these buildings. So, hope you guys out there are all doing too well. I hope you're not doing too bad even. And that you're not too disappointed that I absolutely fluffed up that challenge in the last episode. I'm sure we'll try again at some point. So, in the meantime though, podcast-style episode and all that, I do have a little topic of conversation that I was kind of interested in talking about. It's actually really why I've decided to put Sir down on today's recording session. It's an evening, because I'm going to record this a Monday evening. Done all my work-related stuff, been marking more essays, things like that. I've actually been marking some very different essays. I say essays. Very different summative submissions, I should say, to ones that I've done in the past. Because normally I'm so used to marking, generic essays of varying lengths. But this recent round of kind of assessments that I've been marking are actually a bit different. They're like two-part ones, and they're different as well to the ones that I was talking about a couple of episodes ago. So these ones that I was marking sort of consisted of two parts. One that was like a sort of memo submission, and then another that went with that as kind of like a video file. It was really interesting and kind of weird, and definitely a different type of assessment to what I'm usually used to, because basically I needed to mark a few extensions on a course that I've never actually taught before. But yeah, my institution basically just needed someone to help out with the marking. Because the problem is, it's one of those times of year when several courses all wrap up, and there's an absolute massive papers, summative assessments, things that come in and need doing. But that's not really the topic of conversation that I actually had in mind. It was actually something else entirely. So, I was actually, just earlier this morning, before I started work, I was reading some news articles, as you do, catching up with the day's news, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. I was reading an interesting article, I can't remember where I read it now, but it was an article about working patterns, generational working patterns, so younger people versus older people, what are the kind of working patterns that they typically now undertake or are prepared to undertake, how assertive are they prepared to be in the workplace, stuff like that. And whenever it's not the first time I've ever seen kind of articles like that about different generations and how they work. And in essence, it's one of those kind of articles that fits into that broader theme of, how is society changing? How is it evolving? Things like this. And, with those kind of things, those kind of articles where it's discussing generational change, as an academic, I always kind of look at those and I think it's very easy for them to fall into very generalising terms, to make quite broad, sweeping generalisations about entire groups of people, entire demographics and whatever else have you. So I kind of read it with a bit of a critical eye, and I sort of thought, okay, yeah, I can sort of see where this article's coming from, but at the same time I would wager, you've got to take that kind of thing with a pinch of salt, because in essence what it was discussing differences between working patterns of people from millennial generation, so people by now who are sort of in their kind of 30s and 40s, as contrasted with the working patterns and demands of people from Gen Z or Gen Z, depending on how you want to pronounce that letter. And basically this article was talking quite broad brush strokes about how, millennial people traditionally tend to emphasise, more of like a 9 to 5 working pattern, going into your office really kind of blitzing some work. Well, that's a bit weird, spawning in there. Whereas Gen Z, people of that generation, younger people, are kind of less prepared to do that. For them, they want to work more flexibly, maybe remotely as well. So they kind of look at things and think, why sit in an office 9 till 5 if I've got all the work that needs doing for the day done by, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon? What's the point of them waiting around for a few extra hours? Which, is something interesting, and I can sort of understand that. Because, I myself am not sort of necessarily a huge fan, shall I say, of the kind of traditional 9 to 5 working hours thing, because that works for some people, and if it works for you, that's great. And if you're the sort of person who you can sort of spread out your workload over a day, and you prefer to work in that way, and you can stay pretty productive right throughout an entire day like that, then fine, cool. If you want to work those patterns, go for it. But of course, I think in more recent times, there's an appreciation that not everyone works that way, or at least not everyone works best in that fashion. Some people prefer to actually really blitz their work over the course of several hours, maybe early in the day, but then by the sort of, mid-afternoon, they might be flagging a bit. In which case, rather than kind of pile on for an extra couple of hours till like 5 or 6 in the evening, late afternoon rather, and thus risking burnout, those individuals may look at it and think, actually, if I can just get all my work done by a certain hour, then why stay in the office beyond that? And sure, like I say, I can understand where they're coming from, and I think if workplaces can accommodate that kind of working pattern, then that's certainly something maybe they should seek to do. And, this in many ways kind of links as well to past conversations I've had here on So You're Being Hunted about remote working in response to the COVID pandemic and stuff like that. I know this is quite a, heavy topic, or perhaps quite a dry topic for some of you watching this, but I don't know, I'm kind of fascinated by that subject of, socio-economic change, things like that, how it affects not just working patterns but our everyday lives. It's always fascinating, I find, talking about that kind of stuff and thinking about the future and where it's going. And like I say, with articles like that talking about generational change and differences between demographics, like I say, you've always got to be a bit careful with them, because they do tend to talk in very generalising, broad brush terms, which, to some extent there may be some truth to them, though you do always have to take them with a pinch of salt, because if there's one thing I as an academic would ever tell you, it's that the moment you make a general rule off the top of your head, you'll immediately start to find evidence that contradicts it. So, the majority of evidence, whatever, may support what you're, the assertion you're making, but there'll always be stuff that contradicts it, that doesn't quite fit, that you also have to try and account for. So that's always interesting to note. But yeah, I mean, in my own kind of context, that sort of question of intergenerational sort of working pattern change, stuff like that, and what different generations expect from their workplace, that's certainly something which is a question that comes up on some of the courses I'm involved with teaching. So, from my own background in politics and international sort of relations, and more specifically in an area that's concerned with international security and security studies, certainly those kind of questions are relevant and interesting, because in security studies there's a lot of focus on things like military affairs. What does the military of today look like, or how should it look like, based on the kind of challenges that the international environment faces? And of course, these kind of domestic social questions have huge ramifications. They have huge ramifications for government policy, they have huge ramifications for defence policy, foreign policy, that sort of thing. So it's interesting just to think about them. Because of course, traditionally, military instruments were always a primary method for governments around the world to exert influence, to pursue their own national interest. So of course, if there's demographic changes, in terms of what different generations expect from employment, what they expect from employers, if they expect maybe something fairly rigid or something fairly flexible, these questions ultimately are all relevant to things like recruitment, retention, And of course, ultimately, these kind of organisations, military and government organisations, you need your personnel in order to make things happen. And of course, depending on the demands of certain generations, that means the organisations may have to adapt. Otherwise, they're going to struggle to kind of meet their ends, meet their objectives with potentially dwindling or limited pools of personnel. And of course, it's just an interesting question. So, yeah, there you go, everybody. Just something I thought would be interesting to bring up there. But, there's so many questions really about... sorry, I'm just going to waffle on about sort of, this particular aspect of sort of security studies and things like that. Even though I know, some of you may find it quite heavy. But I'm in full flow now, so fuck it, who cares? I'm sure, Phil's going to talk to me in his next time we converse and be like, yeah, a bit of a heavy topic that there, Andrew. Maybe you should have gone for something more light-hearted, who knows. But it's fascinating and all that. And thing is, one of the big sort of things at the moment in security studies and international relations, when you're looking at it from a sort of the angle of kind of domestic socio-economic politics, is also thinking about, how with the kind of challenges at a political level, at a security level, that nation states around the world now face, is thinking as well about the kind of range of skills which really you need, or potentially need, in order to tackle some of these issues. And thing is, it's like, again, that has kind of ramifications for things like recruitment and retention, not just in a military context, but also in all kinds of professional contexts, in fact. So, the thing is, if you need those skills, that raises questions about education systems, about training, about knowledge, about what kind of people that you really need in the future. Oh, can I just get that? I hear the robots in the background. Sorry, I was just concentrating on these things. Oh, nope, leave me alone. Get the hell out of here. But yeah, those are the questions that I had in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Just in case you're wondering. Alright, what are they doing in the background there? Well, hopefully they should leave me alone in a bit, if I just keep moving in this direction. Clearly they don't want to hear about my topic of conversation, do they? Alright, they should be buggering off yet. They are, that's good. I can switch my torch back on. There we go, ladies and gents. Yes. Yeah, so as I said earlier, since I've kind of exhausted the topic that I was just talking about, I'll go back to what I was talking about earlier, about those summative assessments I was marking. It's like I say, that was a very different type of assessment to what I've marked in the past. The idea of, a two-part assessment consisting of a written memo and a video submission. Because the thing is, the idea of the memo submission was kind of like a written role play, to put it that way. The students were tasked with basically writing a memo as if they were writing to the US President, outlining courses of policy action, things like that. And so the idea was that in a limited amount of word space, they had to be able to show a grasp of the case study that they were looking at, the sort of key background details of it, the key challenges that arise from that case study, and therefore they then had to present some proposals for policy approaches, responses to that challenge, and then actually select one and say, this is the recommended policy approach. So it's one of those assessments which there's no kind of strict right or wrong answer to it. What matters is how well the student sort of actually justifies their choice. So it's asking them to make a choice, outline maybe a couple of competing positions, and then state which one basically they think is the strongest, which one the evidence really kind of supports. And so, like I say, there's no sort of strict right or wrong answer in an assessment like that. It's designed to test your ability to use data, evidence, and reasoning and facts in order to support your case. Which, is a type of assessment that, outside of an academic context, that's used in all kinds of places. For example, in a professional context, before I got my current academic position, I can remember sending out job applications and going to things like job assessment centres for various positions, and that was actually a similar kind of assessment to things you might do, say, in a job assessment centre. Now, if you've ever watched any of my videos on the forest, particularly some of the more kind of up-to-date ones, you might remember there was a episode where me and Phil talked about all like job interviews and things like that, and I talked about an assessment centre I once went to for the civil service fast stream here in the UK. It's interesting because one of their kind of exercises that they do on their test day is similar in a sense to what I just kind of talked about. It's basically a situation where you have to kind of look at a trial policy, and then there's like a couple of sort of options for, you know, whether the policy gets rolled out or whether it gets sort of tweaked. Something like that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. I'd have to go back to that video and rewatch it, but it was something along those lines, and you basically have to pick one of the options and then justify your choice to an examiner. And yeah, so that's a pretty common sort of, well, a more common, I should say, form of assessment, both in an academic context and outside of it. So, like, you know, that sort of assessment is not really about necessarily seeing if you can identify the right or wrong answer. It's about testing your ability to present a well-reasoned, well-evidenced case that's backed up by data, and which there is a good sort of rationale for. So, good to know, ladies and gentlemen. Alright, I'm just going to go over here, because I think we've been recording for probably, 15-ish minutes at the very least there, which probably is around about the right amount of length for a podcast-style episode. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start wrapping up here. Just wanted to record a quick Sir, You're Being Hunted, just to, you know, fill up the schedule a little bit, because it's getting a bit, my current schedule's getting a bit thin, so I need to record some more stuff. In that case, hope you enjoyed, ladies and gentlemen, and, you know, even if it was quite a heavy subject right there, and hope you'll join me for some more Sir, You're Being Hunted in due course. I'm not entirely sure what I'll do next, whether I'll just do another podcast-style episode or whether I'll do an actual challenge, but we'll see, yeah. In that case, Facebook and Twitter links down below, along with the links to my propagandist channel if you're interested. If you enjoyed, a like is always appreciated, but other than that, goodbye everybody. Foregoing distribution tanks. Hello? What? Here. Oh, this is... Oh! What? What? I was just going to say, this room looks like it's full of nope, and it is full of nope. What? I can hear something. What? Oh! What's that? What is that? What was that? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Oh! Oh my god, what is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? No, run, 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 you fucking Mandus!